thank you again. We're going to start the formal session now. Thank you. So I can see on the chat that we've been asking how many people are joining for the first time, but of course we want to welcome everyone. My name is Jackie Demarovska, and I'm one of the facilitators from the Cornerstone Community Church team, working with Anne Horder from Dudley Council and teams from communications, from community development, and of course public health, and also James Henderson and his team from Transforming Communities Together. As a reminder, we just want to remind you of the purpose of these sessions, that it is a community event. It is for the BAME community. It's for all of the community, but we're having a specific focus on the BAME community, given all the evidence from the public health reports on the disproportionate numbers of people from the BAME community affected by the virus and the impact of the virus. We're building on this from the Ash Foundation model, which was a church and health community model. We're strengthening that community engagement model with looking also at involvement, engagement, and mobilization. I just want to say that obviously talking and sharing with the BAME community, it has to be in a language that people understand. So there is more work to do, we recognise that. Please share these videos with your communities. If you're from the Muslim community, from the South Asian community, from the Roma community, from the Black Caribbean, African community, please share the information with family and friends and in your community groups. I just want to say quickly that we're in week 4 of 5, and of course at week 1 we had key public health messages. We had week 2, which was diabetes, obesity, and working towards a healthier lifestyle. Last week we had another excellent session on respiratory, including all the chronic ill health conditions, including COPD, asthma, chronic heart disease, and chronic kidney disease. This week is week 4, a focus on mental health, and we want to thank our speakers in advance for taking the time to join us this week. With the model, we ensure that we have experts in the field that are working on the front line so that the information is very relevant and up to date. I just want to say tonight, I suppose it's like a cautionary thing really, that we know we'll be covering some sensitive topics, but that we will have additional information that will provide support and helplines for anyone going through any of the conditions that we talk about this evening. I just wanted to also say that we, after the recorded session, at the beginning of the meet and greet, we do have a song that we want to share with you, and we're hoping that people will stay on for that. So just before I hand over to the speakers, there's a quote from it's actually Sir Henry Maudsley from the Maudsley Hospital, and it says, "Sorrow that finds no vent in tears makes other organs weep." And I've heard that quote so many times over so many years, and I think it's just stressing the importance of mental health as well as physical health, psychological fears and concerns of the impact for the BAME community, for the wider community, understanding that there's been so much loss. We need to think about, bereavement and care, and continuing to support each other and in the community post-lockdown. So I'm going to hand over to our speakers now. Our speakers tonight are Heidi Napier, Zita Trabaka, Joe Wright, Carol Kelly, Kaljit Johal, Melanie Griffin, And we're also really pleased that we've got Sandra Vaughan from Dudley Mind, who will also join with the Q&A panel. So thank you again for joining us this evening. I'll now hand over to our first speaker, Heidi Napier. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Hello, I'm Heidi and I'm one of the lead psychologists at Black Country Healthcare. And I'm here this evening with my colleagues Jo and Zita, and we're going to talk about caring for your mental health and well-being with some information on how to strengthen your reserves, as well as what to do when you're feeling low or finding things tough, with some practical ways to help yourself cope. I want to preface my talk with a few important concepts which have been highlighted in some really powerful national campaigns over the years, because I want for these to set the tone for this talk and how we think about and understand mental health. Next slide, please. It's okay not to be okay. Those with mental health can feel that they're failing, and this is wrong and presents a real barrier to accessing support. We all stand as a compassionate community. You don't have to face it alone, and you can climb back up and things will look different. Secondly, small talk really does save lives. It's a small but simple thing. If you think somebody might need help, trust your instincts, strike up a conversation. It really can't make things worse. This is for people like us, all of us. Mental health issues don't just affect one type of person, and help can be found beyond individuals, families, or their own ethnic or religious communities. And let's make a real commitment to be in each other's corners, because our attitudes and behaviours can influence others' experience of mental health problems and distress. Being in a friend or family's member corner can make all the difference. So these are deeply unfamiliar times that present many challenges for us and those that we love and care for. Individuals, family groups and communities facing huge uncertainty and disconnection, as well as the burden associated with being at higher risk. We've continued to provide psychological care throughout the pandemic remotely. And in seeking a sense of unity in their struggles, so many of my patients have said to me how, well, we're all in the same boat. And with that, I pause, because whilst we may all be in the same storm, the reality is that we are in very different boats, and some of us are horribly seasick. The reality is that some groups have been hit much harder than others, and in particular we know the BAME community exacerbating some existing inequalities, and this leaves wounds and creates hurt and distrust, anger and fear, compounding the challenges to our overall health and well-being. So we know the threat to our well-being is more apparent than ever, and as such proactively investing in our mental health, and that's what the talk today is about, is more important than ever. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It is totally achievable for each and every one of us and makes a real difference. Next slide, please. So individuals, families and communities play a major role in their own healthcare. As individuals and a collective group, we can all benefit from investing in our well-being. So irrespective of where you might be in this pathway, be that needing a bit of encouragement or having to make more of a concerted effort to get back on track, the evidence suggests that a small improvement in well-being can reduce the risk of mental health problems and really help people to flourish. Similarly, for those experiencing more significant mental health difficulties and in need of additional support, the tasks of well-being can present a framework which can be done alongside any other intervention to help to manage and even decrease symptoms. So as we think about recovery and restoration and reconnection, I understand that culture and faith are an important asset as a foundation for communities' resilience. So combining this with evidence-based actions to promote well-being really maximises this resource. Next slide, please. These 5 ways to well-being are a set of evidence-based actions which promote people's well-being. Now, Dudley Public Health have really embraced this concept as a way to help inspire positive lifestyle choices. These 5 ways to well-being don't determine your well-being, but they offer a set of simple things that individuals can do in their everyday lives. So they're relevant to everyone, young and old. And for many of us, the well-being of our family, supporting them and making a life for them, is as important, if not more important, for our well-being. So as such, throughout this talk, it might be helpful to think about how some of the ideas for the 5 ways to well-being could be shared with the people you live with. This could help stimulate conversation and be an avenue of support for one another. I'm going to talk through each of these 5 pillars of well-being in turn, and each slide will highlight the value of each action and also provide a few examples for how you might practice these in real life. Next slide, please. So connect. Think of relationships with others as the cornerstones of your life. Invest in relationships with the people around you, with family, friends, colleagues, neighbours, at home, work, school, church, and in your local community. Nurturing our relationships can help us feel happier and more secure, and can give us a greater sense of purpose. For months, we've heard about social distancing and physical distancing, but now, in order to be compassionate to ourselves and others, the task is to retain social connectedness, and we start thinking about methods of safe relating. So as part of managing risk and safe relating, for each and every one of you, it's worth thinking about how you will work out what is going to be right for you, how you make decisions about supporting your families, drawing lines which are difficult to draw, and who may be able to help you think these things through, because we understand they're not simple at these times. Next slide, please. Be physically active. Regular physical activity is associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety across all age groups. Don't feel that you need to spend hours in a gym. The activity doesn't need to be particularly intense for you to feel good. Slower paced activities such as walking can have the benefit of encouraging social interactions as well as providing some level of exercise. But all those can be done safely at a safe distance. It's best to find activities that you enjoy and think about how to fit more of them into your daily life. Next slide, please. Learn new skills. Learning can boost self-esteem and confidence and help build a sense of purpose, as well as connecting us with others. Many of us only associate learning with childhood, and that might not have been a positive learning experience, but evidence shows that continuing to learn throughout life can help improve and maintain our mental well-being. So let's approach the concept of learning in a curious way, thinking, I wonder what I could learn. There are many ways to bring learning into your life. New recipes, household skills, the rules of cricket. The key is to find activities that you enjoy and make them part of your everyday routine. The practice of setting goals is strongly associated with higher levels of well-being and often goes hand in hand with any new skill or knowledge development. Next slide, please. Pay attention to the present moment. Reminding yourself to take notice can strengthen and broaden awareness. It can be easy to rush through life with our head down, so let's look up and outwards. Studies have shown that being aware of what's taking place in the present directly enhances your well-being. Savouring the moment can help to reaffirm your life priorities. Heightened awareness also enhances your self-understanding and allows you to make positive choices based on your own values and motivations. Some people call that awareness mindfulness. You can take steps to develop it in your own life, and my colleague Zita will be talking a little bit more about this for you shortly. Next slide, please. Give to others. Most people would agree that giving to others is good in itself, but it can also improve your well-being. Small acts of kindness towards other people, or large ones, can make you feel happier and more satisfied about life. And we know that individuals who report a greater interest in helping other people are more likely to rate themselves as happy. In fact, research into actions for promoting happiness showed that committing an act of kindness once a week over a 6-week period was associated with increased well-being. Next slide, please. That was a bit of a real whistle-stop tour for you. There is a wealth of information on the Dudley Public Health website regarding the 5 areas of well-being. It's a fabulous resource for you and will really help to inspire you to integrate each of the 5 pillars of well-being into your daily lives. Next slide, please. I wanted to finish by very briefly acknowledging the very different experience and grief and bereavement faced by many during this pandemic. There has been huge disruption and change to the rituals of mourning and congregating in grief. So as well as considering creative options as a legacy for those we have lost, please invest in your well-being and make positive lifestyle choices like these 5 areas a priority. There is some excellent information and support resources again on the Dudley Public Health website referenced previously, as well as included in the bereavement booklet, which is available to all those who've been bereaved in Dudley. So next slide, please. I've talked a lot about well-being for emotional health, and I've given you the information. The challenge now is to make it happen. It might feel a bit daunting, but you don't have to do it all at once and you will benefit from it. So I leave you by thinking, what measures can you put in place to consciously use those 5 ways of well-being? To start off with, you'll probably need to schedule planned actions or use a diary, but also think about who will support you and who can you share this with. I'm going to pass you on to my colleagues, Jo and Zita, and they're going to talk to you about some really good practical things and skills you can apply for your emotional health.
That's it. Hi, so my name's Zita Trabocco and I'm an occupational therapist and a dialectical behaviour therapist as well. And I actually work in the PT hub and I deliver psychological therapies. So I deliver groups from anxiety management, distress tolerance, low mood, self-esteem, and also mindfulness. So mindfulness is a big part of the role that I do. So can I have the next slide, please? So mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, known as MBCT, has been around for about 40 years. It's in the NICE guidelines, so it's recommended for the treatment of recurring depression. And this is where perhaps CBT hasn't necessarily been effective. It is a powerful tool, so it helps prevent relapsing depression and the after effects of trauma. It's used for back pain, stress, worry, tinnitus. And it was initially mindfulness-based stress reduction about 40 years ago. And then over the years following that, it was changed to the MBCT. But it has been around for about 3,000 years when you link it to Buddhism and Zen and the actual practice of that, which is being non-judgmental and focusing on the here and now. So it's just really to say that a lot of people that do the MBCT do have religion, and you can use your religion in isolation alongside mindfulness. So I think mindfulness does link into a lot of people's religion, so you can kind of use it within your religion. Next slide, please. So it is a transdiagnostic intervention. It helps with consistent negative thinking, especially when the thinking is very traumatic and it actually takes us away from the here and now. It helps with OCD, maladaptive behaviour, so it helps when people engage in behaviour that has an impact on quality of life or can be life-threatening. It also helps with eating disorders, hearing voices, bereavements, relieves stress, improves sleep, and also it's extremely helpful for chronic pain and also chronic back pain. Next slide, please. So the aims are really to bring a quality of awareness to the things that we do in the here and now. Often we perhaps think about past that's happened that we can't change, or we think about future that hasn't happened, and that can take us away from what actually is here right now. We tend to miss things that could give us pleasure, and we can kind of miss conversations, we can miss relationships, and life can pass us by when we're not mindful. It also helps us to bring more awareness to thoughts, what's occurring, physical sensations and emotions, so we can then nip those things in the bud if they're not effective and have an impact on our mental health. It also helps with acceptance and also working with difficulty and acceptance of difficult times. It also promotes being non-judgmental, which is very, very difficult, as when we are judgmental, whether that's to ourselves or others, that can have an impact on our thoughts, our emotions and physical sensations, and usually it's that cascade that happens that gives us the more difficulty. So it helps us to focus on the here and now, lets go of unhelpful thinking patterns and reduces habitual cycles that the mind has got into. And usually when we have each episode of depression or anxiety, it tends to be worse because you add on previous episodes as well. So mindfulness really helps to manage that. Also, it helps to retrain the mind and helps us grow neural pathways. There's a lot of research on the Mental Health Foundation, and just 8 sessions of mindfulness, the MBCT, changes the patterns in the frontal lobe that increases our positive emotions. So there has been a lot of research there if you kind of want to look into that. Next slide, please. So these are just some quotes of what is mindfulness. I'm not going to read through those. If you kind of Google or YouTube, there'll be a lot more quotes as well. But Jon Kabat-Zinn is, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And that's one of my favourite quotes that I use quite a lot with my patients. Next slide, please. So coping with stressful situations while mindfully. So informally, weaving it into everyday routine, for example, walking, eating, washing up, taking a shower. If we can perhaps change one thing that we do mindfully, as in using the 5 senses and really focusing on what we can see, touch, hear, as opposed to maybe sometimes people think that we have to put time aside to be mindful, but we can incorporate it into what we do. And the more we incorporate it into what we do, the more of a habit it does become, and it can be extremely helpful. So driving, sometimes I drive and I'm on automatic pilot and I suddenly get to where I am without realizing the route I've taken. And I really have to work hard to be mindful. Sometimes if I lock up on an evening and I'm not mindful, I have to go back and check. So even though I've done mindfulness for about 10 years, sometimes it's a struggle, and that's when I have to really, really work hard to do it, even now after 10 years. So there's a formal mindfulness, so that's the meditation practices such as the body scan, and that can be anything up to an hour. Mindful movement, mindful stretching, and there is a link at the end of Joe's slides that will take you to the YouTube playlist where there's about 17 mindfulness practices that we've done for the Trust. So also focusing on the breath. There's a 3-minute breathing space, which is really, really important. That's also on the YouTube playlist. And that's almost kind of like a mini meditation, which bridges the gap between the formal and informal meditation. And also yoga, Tai Chi, also religion, quotes, reading verses from the Bible or anything else. You can use that as an object of your mindfulness. Next slide, please. So yes, this is a picture. It's really asking yourself, are you mindful or mindful? Okay, next slide, please. So that's the end of my presentation, and I know that was very, very quick, but I will hand you over to my colleague, Jo Wright.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to introduce myself. First of all, my name is Jo Wright, and I work within the Psychological Therapist Hub. Zita has explained a little bit about what we already do, but I want to focus on now is something that we use within our distress tolerance group. It's a skill for when people are in distress or in a crisis, and I can't think really of another time in my life when we haven't been in such a difficult time. And I think it's fair to say at some point, everybody will have been in distress in the last few weeks, last few months. And the skill of self-soothing that I'm going to be talking about today is a skill that we can use to promote well-being. It's a skill that you can use at any time, but particularly when you're distressed, when you're very, very emotionally overwhelmed. And I think just lately, we've all been bombarded with messages of negativity, and there's constant talk about increased risk. We've all had to learn to very different living circumstances, and there's been change like we've never really had before. So I think this is a skill that can use and help anybody if you're struggling with anxiety, low mood, low self-esteem, or anything really. And it helps when you're emotionally overwhelmed. So perhaps you've just had a really bad day, or you're very upset about something. The skill of self-soothing is something you can use to help reduce your emotional distress. It can act as a distraction. So perhaps if things are getting too much and you need just to have a little bit of a break, or you need to have time for your emotions to simmer down, this can be a great skill to use. And actually it can change emotions, particularly if you are really struggling. It can turn emotions from perhaps being very negative and distressing and unhelpful, and it can turn those into emotions that are a little bit more bearable, and perhaps it gives you the opportunity to choose helpful options. Most people self-soothe at some point in their life, and you probably do some of these things already. But unfortunately, when we're not very well, or if our mental health isn't as good as it could be, we sometimes forget to do these things. Or certainly these are things that we can do that are usually quite cheap, quite easy to do, that you can add into your life at any time to help you. A lot of people, like I say, possibly do things that aren't helpful. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, people perhaps might resort to alcohol or self-harm, or perhaps overeating, which obviously has negative kind of results because of that. So all of the things we would suggest with self-soothing are to make you feel better and to enhance your well-being. The idea with self-soothing is to really try and think about how you can incorporate things into your day-to-day life that allow you to feel content, relaxed, safe, nurtured. So they're the types of things that just make you feel better and more positive. And it will be completely different for me as it would be to each and every person, because we're all unique, and what I find enjoyable and self-soothing will be completely different to somebody else. So the suggestions we're going to give, perhaps you need to maybe go and have a think about, if you can, about what would be best for you. So the self-soothing usually links into our 5 senses, and that's usually because it tends to have a better result. So what I'd like to do, if I can have the next slide, please, is talk about touch. Our sense of touch is something that can be really, really very therapeutic. In the last few weeks and months, we've been distancing from everybody so much that this is something a lot of people have really struggled with, to reach out to loved ones, to have that physical touch and, an affection, but just feeling very isolated and not having the opportunity to do things that perhaps normally you would. There's some suggestions on here as to what you can do to kind of link into that sense of touch. But again, it'll be different to every person. So it's things like fidget spinners are quite a recent modern thing. Clicking a pen, any kind of repetitive action people quite like can be self-soothing. Massage is very good, and that doesn't have to be booking into an expensive spa. It can be massaging some hand cream into your hands. It can be using a stress ball. It could be stroking a soft blanket, stroking a pet if you have a pet. Maybe something like getting into a bed when you've just put freshly cleaned sheets on. Again, unique to each and everyone and your own preference. We have got in there a cold gel mask that can be very soothing, maybe just putting a cold flannel on your face. It's important to just experiment even, because not everything will work each and every time. But a few suggestions there for touch. And if I can have the next slide, please, I'll move on to smell. Smell is something that's very powerful for a lot of people, and there are certain smells that we connect to automatically to make us feel more relaxed, or they have certain memories attached to them that can make us feel really calm. So candles and incense is a very common one that people really like to have to make them feel calm and relaxed. So a particular smell, maybe lavender, vanilla, maybe it's your favourite soap, your favourite perfume. It might be the smell of coffee in the morning when you have a drink, or the smell of freshly baked bread. We all have a smell that we enjoy. So that's something to maybe discover or reflect on, so you can work out what is a smell you find comforting. Next slide, please. So taste is the next one. Again, all have different flavors. So it might be sweet, it might be sour. You might have a particular food that you really find very nurturing. It might be chocolate is mine. It would definitely be chocolate for me, but for somebody else, it might be a nice big bowl of pasta, or your favorite childhood meal. Favorite drink, preferably not alcohol, is also very good. So a hot chocolate, nice cup of tea. One of my self-soothing activities is to sit in the garden with a cup of tea. So just something small, doesn't have to be anything big, but just something that you know that is relaxing to you. Next slide, please. Hearing, again, sound is very emotive. So we all have different sounds we like. It might be nature sounds. Usually that is very relaxing for most people. So the sounds of rain, the ocean, particular music. You can get a lot of apps now which are free, which have a range of nature sounds for you to listen to. And also there's a lot of things on YouTube. So it's quite easy to tap into that one. With everything with self-soothing, it's important to be careful that the things you choose to use aren't the kind of things that might make you more emotional and perhaps make the problem worse. And sounds and hearing is a particular one. Some music can make us feel worse rather than better. So it's helpful to have a little think about what's the best for you to use. And the next slide, please. It's vision or sight. And it's just really, again, thinking about what we enjoy looking at that makes us feel calm and relaxed. For me, it would be a walk in the park, maybe being around water. Nature is usually a good one because it incorporates all the senses together, but it could be having a shell, which you could also feel, and that would be your sense of touch. It might be something you enjoy watching, something like a funny comedy, something you film that can aid as self-soothing and as a distraction. Crosswords, puzzles, reading, photos, again, making sure that they're quite neutral photos, perhaps not too much of people that we know and love. Just being generally mindful, linking in what Zita talked about, just really, when we're looking at things, really look at them with new eyes and really try and pay attention as much as we can. Or perhaps lighting a candle or something that's just calming and relaxing. Again, on YouTube, you can get clips of the ocean, clips of nature that you can watch with sounds as well. And next slide, please. Thank you. What you can do when it comes to self-soothing is you can do it anytime you like. Anytime you feel distressed, you can choose any one of the activities we've talked about to do. But another thing you can do, which can be really great, is to get a self-soothing box. It doesn't have to be a box, it can be a drawer or a bag, where you just put a whole collection of things together that you find relaxing and soothing, so that when you're upset or distressed, you can go to this box and you've got lots of options already there for you. So you don't have to do too much thinking. So in the picture, you can see there's a colouring book, there's crayons, there's a fidget toy, there's bubbles, underneath there's some music. It's just because sometimes when we're really upset or distressed, we forget what to do to help ourselves. It's not our fault, it's what our brain does. So if we've already got ourselves a self-soothing box, that can be really helpful as a go-to. We can use it in a crisis, but we can also use it regularly if we need to. And I think the main message with self-soothing is just taking care of yourself, because sometimes we're really good at taking care of other people, but we're not so good at taking care of ourselves. And that's really important when it comes to our well-being. Next slide, please. So the question here is what to do when we're not coping, and that would be perfectly okay, particularly at times like now. If people were struggling, I think myself included, I think most people have found it quite hard at the moment. So it's important sometimes to maybe ask yourself some of these questions so that you can have a plan for when you're struggling. So things like, who can I call? Have you got a list of people, friends, family, that you can call if you need just to talk to somebody or you need some support, or even voluntary services such as the Samaritans or different helplines that are out there? And ask yourself, is there anything I can do right now to improve how I feel? Is there anything in the longer term I could do? Are there some plans I can make, some activities I can link into that are going to help me? Are there any apps I can use, any activities that I can use? Sometimes it's really helpful to kind of
Hi everyone. I'm not sure what's happened there. I've just asked if anyone's losing sound, and I think we've lost Joe for a moment there. I think we might just need to ask Joe to sign out and to sign back in. I'm just going to ask Zita if there's anything else that she'd want to say just whilst we're trying to get Joe back online. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Zita, but before we go to Carol, I just wanted to check if there was anything else that you wanted to say.
Yeah, I think Joe's more or less finished. I think that the main thing is that it's really important that you get together a list, you know, similar to the list that we've got here, when you are in a wise state of mind, so that when things do happen where there's been loss or emotions or something else, you actually know what you can do. Because when we do experience distress, the last thing we will think about is what can I do, who can I call, and that's when sometimes we may engage in behaviour that's not effective. So you really need to do this list, put down as much as you can, so when you do go into distress, you've actually got it there readily available, as opposed to when you are in distress, we just don't know what to do. So that's the advice I could give. And I think if you put together a self-soothing box, put this list in a self-soothing box and have your self-soothing box to hand. But go through your box once or twice a week. Don't just use it when you're in crisis or in distress. Get used to using it once or twice a week. So when you are in crisis or in distress, we can use it a little bit more easier. Okay, and I think that's the end of the self-soothing. So there are some websites there, and the last one is that's an app that takes you to the YouTube playlist for the mindfulness that myself and a colleague actually did. There's about 16 mindfulness practices there that range from about 14 minutes to about 45 minutes. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much, Zita, for just stepping in and completing the presentation there with the excellent information from Joe. I think if we can go straight to Carol now, and of course all of our speakers will be on the Q&A panel, so we will have the opportunity to hear from Joe at the end. So we can go straight to Carol Kelly now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Kelly. I am the Regional Senior Independent Domestic Violence Advisor for Black Country Women's Aid, and I cover all three areas that we cover for domestic abuse support. Next slide, please. So Black Country Women's Aid, we've been established for approximately about 30 years. For a long while, we were called Sandwell Women's Aid, whilst we only covered the Sandwell Borough. We now cover Dudley and Walsall for domestic abuse services. We cover Birmingham, Wolverhampton, and Coventry for other services such as stalking and our Women's Justice Service. So we provide holistic and sensitive support that's helped over 8,000 victims of abuse each year to escape domestic abuse and violence and cope with the trauma that they've suffered and rebuild their lives. We offer emotional support as well as practical support. And our sort of trusted saying is, we listen, we support, we care. During the COVID-19 outbreak, the way in which we've had to get our support out there and across to victims of domestic abuse had to change drastically. We were faced with a situation where predominantly abusers were in the same household as their abused partners for longer periods of time, with the lockdown, with people being furloughed, people shielding. The opportunity to speak to other people was reduced significantly. Next slide, please. So just before we go into how we changed our services, I'd just like to run through what the definition of domestic abuse is. So the national definition is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members regardless of gender or sexuality. The definition includes honour-based violence, female genital mutilation and forced marriage. Next slide, please. So in terms of controlling and coercive behaviours, it became a criminal offence in 2015 for these types of behaviours. Unfortunately, these are the ones that are the hardest to prove. So when we're looking at people in a COVID situation where they are in the household with their children and their abuser now for longer periods of time, then, you know, controlling and coercive behaviour can increase significantly. From just the definitions alone, controlling behaviour is designed to make a person subordinate and or dependent by isolating them. COVID has given us a unique platform for abusers to utilise, unfortunately. So could you go to the next slide, please? So, so as an organisation, we worked with Dudley Council and Sandwell Council and Walsall Council to come up with the plan was how we were going to support victims of domestic abuse during a time like this, and how we were going to let them know that we were still open for business. You know, we were still there, we were going to listen, we were going to support, we were going to care, but it was getting our message out there that was going to be the difficult thing. So we got together, we worked with Dudley Council on a sort of promotion, and we developed a text helpline so that if people couldn't use the internet or they couldn't call us because somebody was there all the time, but texting is probably more natural to most people now, and quite, you know, nobody bats an eyelid now and you see people all the time texting. So we developed the text lines to enable people to be able to approach us if they needed to, and we got that out and flung it as far as and wide as we could. The difficulty then we had was, well, all services were closed, people weren't going to the GPs, people weren't going, you know, and sitting in Costa Coffee having a coffee. So it was how do we do that? So pharmacies remained open throughout, supermarkets remained open throughout, so we targeted those businesses that people were going to for things that were necessities, as opposed to like sitting in Costa Coffee having a coffee, you know. So we had to sort of rethink the wheel a little bit. We didn't want to reinvent it, we just needed to rethink it, and the way in which we delivered the support had to change. So what we tried to do was get together with partner agencies to ensure that we knew what the signs of domestic abuse were, you know, so we could highlight those, so people might be more asking the question around domestic abuse, or if everything was okay. So there are different types of domestic abuse, and the one in which I want to concentrate this evening is the coercion and the control aspect of it, because I think that's the most that's the one that gets overlooked because it's harder to prove. Next slide, please. Okay, so the types of behaviour we see with coercion and control. may not always constitute a criminal offence just by the nature of it. So such as the behaviours as isolating a person from their friends and family. And like I said previously, I think the COVID-19 situation gave abusers a unique green light to be able to do this, and build on anything they had previously, or start this behaviour even. So to deprive victims of their basic needs, and that may be access to excuse me, money, food, water, you know, just if you're with somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that becomes easier to do. Excuse me. So monitoring their time, and clearly if you're not going out and about, you're not taking the children to school, you're not popping to the shops every 5 minutes because you've forgotten the bread and stuff, and trips to the shops became less and less, didn't they? You were really only going to, you were getting your big shop and making sure you got everything in the big shop, and if you didn't get it, pretty much you went without. So types of coercive behaviours and control may be monitoring somebody, monitoring their online movements, their footprint online, using some of the social media platforms in order to know what they're doing at any given point in time, to know what conversations that they're having with other people, or using a kind of spyware so they can see where people are all of the time if they were going out and about. Okay, so what else? What we would also look at being hard to prove to an outsider is somebody controlling all aspects of everyday life. So where and where they go, who they can see, what to wear, when they can sleep, who they can call, how long they can call them for, you know, do they really need that GP appointment? And if so, is the abuser going to go along with them? So it's kind of, it's harder to prove some of these behaviours than it is if there was physical abuse, for instance, and along with emotional abuse. Quite often we do see, as a result of these kind of behaviours, women presenting with some low-level mental health need, or anxiety, stress-related ailments that they've not contributed to the stress that's going on at home. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, deprivation of access to support services, that might include specialist support, medical services, repeatedly putting somebody down, telling them that they're worthless, enforcing rules and activity which humiliate, degrade or dehumanise the victim, and financial abuse, which is a really big one in terms of abusive behaviours, especially if we share a home and we share bills and a mortgage and we've got a couple of kids, and you know, all the money goes into the pot. Financial abuse can sort of very subtly become a big thing because we're not even sure it's happening until all of a sudden we have no control over our finances. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we look at types of behaviour which are probably easier to prove, sort of, and would be taken perhaps a little bit more seriously, there are some up here that sort of like threats to kill. If we reported threats to kill to the police, I take that very, very seriously, and obviously threats to a child. Threats to reveal or publish private information, or threatening to out somebody if they've been in a same-sex relationship, for instance. An assault, criminal damage, destruction of household goods, usually not their own, I hasten to add, usually something that you might hold dear to you, or something that you've saved up for a long time. 22% of people report rape, which is when you're in an intimate relationship with somebody, quite often goes unreported. because victims feel that they're duty bound. Preventing a person from having access to transport or from working, again, can be contributed to isolation, financial abuse, coercion, control. So some of the risk factors that we see, and this is year upon year, is that 30% of domestic abuse starts in pregnancy. And I'm sure we're going to see during the COVID sort of an influx of lockdown pregnancies coming to the forefront. Strangulation, separation, being always accompanied. Child contact, if parties have separated, child contact is used as a weapon and a tool in order to continue the coercion and control. And quite often we see associated drugs, alcohol and mental health issues manifesting as coping strategies for the victims or as triggers for the abusers. Next slide, please. So, who are the victims of domestic abuse? Safe Lives, which is the national organisation that provides guidance to domestic abuse organisations, state that more than 100,000 people in the UK are at imminent risk of being murdered or seriously injured. And our figures in our local MARAC meetings would reflect that. And MARAC is multi-agency risk assessment conference. So victims who have been identified as being at high risk will be heard at the MARAC meeting, just to make sure that, first of all, agencies are aware and we share information that might not have been shared on any other platform, and that we can try and put in an effective action plan to safeguard that person and their children. Okay, so each year, 50,000 high-risk victims and 70,000 children are discussed at those conferences. And they're national conferences, they're held up and down the country, normally every fortnight. In some high traffic areas like Birmingham, they're weekly. More than 90% of those victims are female, 5 to 10% are male, 15% are from the BAME community, 4% are disabled, and 1% are from the LGBT community, which, you know, the figures, it isn't because domestic abuse doesn't happen within those areas, it is far less reported, and certainly men do not report as often as women do. But equally, we could say that if we're saying 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse, then we're looking at 1 in 4, 1 in 5 men do too. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of domestic homicide reviews, some of the information that we got from there was that women are far more likely to be killed by partners or ex-partners. And in the year 2015 to 2016, 44% of domestic abuse homicide reviews were female, compared with the 7% of male. Okay, so when we look at the characteristics of victims, it means that they're more likely to be abused. Women are much more likely than men to be victims of high risk or severe domestic abuse. 95% of those are going to MARAC or accessing the IDVA service are women. Victims from low income households, younger people, next slide please. People with care and support needs, so people with long-term illnesses or disabilities that are self-declared are most likely to be victims of domestic abuse. More than 50% of disabled women in the UK may have experienced domestic abuse. It may not have been reported, but there's been a study to suggest that maybe, 50% of disabled women are victims. More disabled men experience domestic abuse than non-disabled men, with the risk to a disabled man being similar to that in a woman with as to a woman in general. Next slide, please. Okay, so disabled people who are experiencing domestic abuse are twice more likely to have had planned or attempted suicide at some point. 2 small-scale studies of women with learning difficulties and domestic abuse found that the levels of physical violence they experienced were particularly high and of high risk, i.e. they normally had either the use of weapons or threats to kill associated with them. Next slide, please. So one of the questions, you know, and one of the things we train on are, does domestic abuse occur in same-sex relationships? There are so many myths around this area, but absolutely it does happen. People often think that the male-female dynamic domestic abuse is likely to happen, whereas male on male does happen and female on female does happen. We don't get so many reports of it, but it potentially happens in equal numbers. The barriers in same-sex relationships are slightly different because they may not have come out to family and friends, so therefore they feel restricted in reporting anything. They can be unusually isolated, and obviously that intensifies the abuse. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the questions we hear, we hear it probably daily. Why doesn't she just leave? And you may have been in conversations yourself when somebody may have said, oh, if that happened to me, I would just leave. You know, when you invest time and effort and love into a relationship, it's not that easy to just leave. Okay, so one of the things we are working on is blaming survivors for staying, and maybe now looking at abusers' behaviour. Why does he do that? You know, as opposed to why doesn't she just leave? So we'd support lots of victims to remain in their family homes and not just up sticks and leave everything behind and change their whole way of life. Quite often they don't want to do that, so we support them in being able to stay where they are with appropriate safeguarding measures put in place and orders. So they do have barriers to leaving. The first one being probably the most obvious, which is fear. Often victims don't really understand the danger that they're in, but there's that element of fear, and danger comes with when you're the recognition of that danger. They're living with this day in, day out. They do not associate the level of risk that we as professionals may do. You know, but they may have had threats to say, if you leave, I will take the children. If you leave, I will find you and kill you. Then there's the isolation of leaving that relationship, shame, embarrassment, trauma, low confidence, low self-esteem. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just quickly going to run through the legislation on forced marriage. And if we could go to the next slide, please. The legislation, very quickly, is it's illegal in England and Wales under the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act for people to be forced into marriage, men or women. So we can get forced marriage protection orders against potential victims of force, against potential family members who are trying to force people into marriage. So quite often we get asked about arranged marriage and forced marriage, and that there is a distinct difference. Arranged marriage is a marriage where the families have arranged for a daughter of one family to marry the son of another, and those parties have free will and choice in doing that. A forced marriage is where two families have arranged for the marriage to take place, but the people involved have not consented for that to happen. And and there is duress and threats involved in that. Okay, so it can be quite a grey area. Okay, so could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so we also support victims of honour-based violence, but there is no government definition of it, unfortunately. So honour-based violence is normally a collective and planned crime of incident, mainly perpetrated against women and girls by their family or their community. In large part, it is normally the female members of the family that instigate these crimes. So, and that is because they perceive their honour to have been, to be shamed by the person or persons, and they think that they have been brought shame to the family. And there have been incidents, and I'm sure we're all aware of some of the incidents that have been highlighted within the media and the press in relation to honour-based violence. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so so that's it from me. The details for Black Country Women's Aid are on the end slide there. And if anybody wants to ask any further questions, feel free to in the comments box, as I'll be available afterwards. So my name's Carol Kelly, and thank you from me. And I would like to hand over to Cal Johal from Kooth. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for that. As Carol says, my name's Cal Johal. I'm the Regional Service Manager covering the Midlands on the North East, managing the contracts called Kooth. So Kooth is an online digital provision for young people and adults. Majority of our contracts that we have are for children and young people. The service itself has been around for 20 odd years, connecting young people and adults with clinicians on an online supportive platform. We're a trusted online service, and we've been commissioned across not 75% of the country, and supporting over 250,000 young people who have used our service at some point. The service we're currently commissioned for, as I say, are Kooth, which is our young people services. We have a Quail, which is our adult services, and that's only available in some parts of the country. And then we have what we call Kooth Student, which is the Kooth young people's online platform for universities, students at university. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh. So the Kooth offer is really to provide young people with early response to getting intervention where there's identified emotional well-being or mental health problems, and they need that early support where things could start be escalating, where we think that an argument with a best friend could be a start of some emotional or mental health stress that could be having an impact on that young person's well-being. Moving school transition is a big aspect for some young people that have access to Kooth. So I say it's about early intervention and access. It's about getting young people to have early help and support, and those self-help tools that they need to help build their resilience and their self-help. But it's also about removing barriers for young people who might have limited or find it difficult to access some provision. So we see Kooth as that first platform to breaking down some of those barriers, particularly for those vulnerable, hard to reach and disadvantaged young people. So it's offering that first step to accessing services, and we see ourselves as that stepping stone for young people to talk about their issues, but also at the same time being able to have the confidence to be referred or access face-to-face services or specialist mental health services. It's also about working collaborative. We're very much about working collaborative with other organisations and partnership, working with providers that offer that face-to-face service and having more of that joint collaborative approach. It's also about increasing the capacity and knowledge of schools, that they have access to a digital platform that they can signpost young people to. So COOS isn't a service where we require a referral. Young people can be signposted to the platform. Can I have the next slide, please? So COOS itself, we just give you a bit background on what the service is. So COOS is an online digital platform. It's completely anonymised service, so we don't ask for young people's names or home address or where they live. The only thing we ask at the stage of registration is what area they're from, sublocation, their ethnicity, age and gender. They then are able to create a username and password that is non-identifiable to anybody else. So it's completely anonymised. It's available, the website itself is available 24/7. So young people can log at any point of the day, or we have young people that log in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's absolutely fine, because if they're worried or anxious about certain aspects, they know where they can go to get some self-help referrals. They can send a message to the online counsellors or our wellbeing practitioners just to get that early support that they think that they would need or require. So once they've gone through that setup, sign up stage, they have access to the COOS platform itself. So what they see when they get to the online platform is you've got hundreds and hundreds of articles that from either our clinicians or young people have shared their stories or their journeys around their mental health or their well-being, their kind of background, could be challenges that they've had from school or living with a disability, so they're able to share their experiences with other young people, and that also kind of provides an online peer-to-peer kind of community online where young people can talk to other young people and being able to relate and share experiences, but everything's moderated, so nothing's shared or comments or links are made without being checked by our clinicians first. So we ensure we're managing risk. Young people aren't sharing their names or their details or contact details with others, so it's managed through that. So we have, as I say, the articles. We also do live forums. So on a weekly basis, we do live topics on things that could be happening in that month. Could be things that are going on in the current situation. So we've done a lot of conversation around anxiety for a lot of young people that might be finding it difficult, be due to the isolation. We've done articles online around currently understanding what is COVID-19 and the impact and how that's having an impact on young people at school, not seeing their friends, worries about exams. So there's a variety of forums that we deliver online. But it also offers a platform for young people to be able to chat to a qualified counsellor. It's very similar to a face-to-face service, but it's text-based, so they can speak to a counsellor or a wellbeing practitioner about things that they might be worried about, or if they don't feel like they need a structured chat counselling, we offer what we call messaging service. So young people can message our online team. It could be about anything that could have an impact on a young person, saying they've had a really bad day at school, or they're struggling at home down to lockdown, or they're having arguments with their friends. It could be about anything that they just feel like they need to talk to somebody externally with. So we have that kind of messaging facilities. We've also more recently kind of provided new services online for young people. So there's things that they can do themselves. So things like making their own coping box, writing a letter to their future self, expressing themselves, how to connect with others, about managing their emotions, sleeping patterns, and helpful habits. So there's a range of activities that young people can go on. So as I say, the platform itself is available 24/7, but the chat and messaging service is available from 12 o'clock noon till 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, and Saturday and Sunday we operate from 6 till 10. The service itself is we're around all year round, even Christmas. So we have staff that work Christmas days, but on a reduced timetable. but we kind of see ourselves as that platform to support young people that might be struggling, and particularly out of hours service, where they kind of want to talk to somebody and are struggling with their well-being. So we kind of see Kooth as that platform to start those initial conversations. So it does offer a range of intervention. So just to give you an idea of what we're kind of numbers wise, what are we kind of seeing on the online platform statistically? So if we look at 2019, 2020, we had 141,677 young people who registered on Kooth. So these are new young people that have registered on the site. Out of that number, 26,910 of those registrations were young people who identified themselves as from a BAME background. So we delivered 62,000, just over 62,000 chat sessions. So those are the structured online counselling sessions. We had 431,000, just over 431,000 messages by young people. So it's a bit like if you talk about messages as a WhatsApp message where you send a message and you get a response back. We had 294,000 articles viewed by young people and 775,000 forums views. So those are the forums, either live forums or forum threads that young people have started around things that might be how they want to talk about and to other young people and get some kind of online support for themselves. Can I have the next slide? So if we look at the kind of the themes, the key themes that we are seeing on Kooth during the COVID-19, so over the last 16 plus weeks, what our data has shown from Kooth. So we've seen anxiety and stress has increased amongst young people by 53%. 1 in 5 young people are struggling with issues around family relationships. Self-harm, we've seen a major increase under lockdown. Suicidal thoughts has gone up by 40% compared to last year. And young people who struggle with friendships during that lockdown period. And school and college related mental health issues where they are worried about school, going back to school, not being at school, worried about what's going to happen with exams or what's going to happen with results, what their future holds. Kind of feeling of sadness during the increased weeks of lockdown, and particularly loneliness amongst young people who've isolated. So we've seen an increase of 134% of young people who are experiencing loneliness and isolation. So that kind of gives you the overall kind of views and themes of what we are seeing online and what young people are saying. Can I have the next slide? So just talking about kind of looking at the key themes and looking at particularly around children and young people from an ethnic minority background. So what we are seeing within the Kooth platform, so all the young people that have registered or have used chat and messages. So what we're seeing based on those young people, we're seeing a greater increase of depression, anxiety, self-harm and suicidal thoughts compared to their white peers during the COVID-19. So Kooth service users from BAME backgrounds are showing a higher level of self-harm, suicidal thoughts, depression and anxiety compared to their white service users, compared to the same period last year, 2019. White children and young people have shown a decrease in depression, so minus by 16.2% reduction in depression amongst white young people during the COVID, and BAME young people, we've seen an increase of 9% around depression. Suicidal thoughts has been increasingly worrying, and particularly for what we're seeing for BAME young people. So we've seen a 26.6% increase of young people who've highlighted where they're presented with suicidal thoughts compared to 2019, where where comparison with children and young people from a white background, we've seen a lower increase, so 18.1% decrease of young people with suicidal thoughts. And what we're finding at the present moment with young people that are logging onto the platform, some young people are quite happy and quite calm being at home. Some young people, particularly from the white backgrounds, are finding that this is a kind of nice long summer holiday, so they're not kind of presenting online as much. But we are expecting during probably August, end of August, beginning of September, seeing an increase of young people who are accessing Kooth because of worries or anxiety or concerns about going back to school, making kind of particularly around year sixes and transition to year 7, and not having that period where they've had a chance to say goodbye to their friends, starting off a new academic year with making friends in a particular environment where they've not been used to. Anxiety and stress is the most prevalent issue for young people from a BAME background. We've seen an 11.4% increase compared to previous years. Amongst their white counterpart, the issue has a far lower increase of 3%. So anxiety and stress, as I say, anxiety and stress, depression, self-harm and suicide are the main presenting key themes so far that we've seen in Kooth during the COVID period. Can I have the next slide, please? So it kind of just talking about mental health and BAME communities, I think it's kind of really important to kind of understand that in the UK, individuals from the BAME communities are being fed additional information that claims that BAME individuals are more at risk of dying at the hands of the current virus than anyone else because of who they are, without there being much information of why this is and what can be done to prevent the increase. It can be seen as it's kind of understandable where there may be further contribute to individuals from these communities feeling an increased level of stress, anxiety and depression, even if they are constantly aware of the impact. So I think mental health of the BAME community is important because children, young people or adults from these communities often face individual or society challenges that can have an impact on their healthcare and overall mental and physical health. Just going on to the last slide. So just to give you an idea, if we're looking at mental health and particularly within the BAME communities and the contributing factors. So if we look at racism and discrimination, people from the BAME communities probably experience high levels of racism in their personal lives, ranging from casual to quite explicit harmful comments and verbal and physical aggression. Research says that experiencing racism can be very stressful and have a negative impact on individuals and their overall health and mental well-being. The social and economical inequalities. BAME communities are often faced with disadvantage in the communities. They're more likely to experience poverty, poor educational outcomes, higher unemployment, more likely to have contact with the criminal justice system, face challenges in accessing or receiving appropriate professional services, and particularly in accessing some healthcare provision. Amongst the 16 to 24-year-olds, unemployment rates are higher for young people from a black background and from Pakistani and Bangladeshi background compared to the white counterpart. Looking at mental health stigma, I think this is one of the biggest topics, is the stigma still associated with mental health and not different communities and the level of understanding about mental health. And actually kind of having conversations, particularly in places of worship with these community organisations, of understanding the mental health and physical health they are the same. I think mental health is seen in a very negative light, which can kind of cause kind of getting young people or even adults seeking help, professional help, if they are experiencing mental or emotional well-being difficulties, and can be a barrier to accessing some of these health services. And I think that's where Kooth kind of really fits into that whole kind of breaking down some of those barriers and those disadvantages, because the online, and it's saying that, not saying the online provision can replace face-to-face services. It's not that. We see ourselves working in hand with face-to-face services and breaking down some of those barriers for those young people to be able to access services at times and on a platform that is accessible to all young people or even adults. It can be accessed by a mobile phone, it can be accessed by a computer. As I say, the times it's open, the website itself is available 24/7. The chat sessions or the kind of live sessions where they can talk to a clinician, the 12 till 10, it kind of opens up particularly for young people who where other services might be closed at 5 o'clock, they can still come to an online platform and have access to immediate support as I say, without a referral. It's not time restricted, so it's not saying once they log on, they have 6 months of access. What we recognise, it's very young people led service. So the contents that you see, articles, 90% of the content is written by young people themselves, sharing their experiences. But it's also about young people supporting other young people on that platform. We are very much aware that we are kind of increasing our contents to reflect different communities. So we have a lot of contents that can be adapted to different communities, cultures and religions. So we more recently doing some contents around Eid. At the present time, we've done lots of articles around Pride. And over the last couple of weeks, we've done a lot around Black Lives Matter and the impact it has on young people. And then the last bit on the kind of looking at mental health and BAME communities is that element of other factors. Many groups face inequalities in physical mental health, and that's due to things like disability, sexuality, gender, age. And I think in order to understand the different BAME communities' experiences of mental health problems and services provided, it's also necessary to consider the aspects of the additional race and ethnicity that we're working with and the needs of those communities. So I think what we see as COOS as a platform is that starting process and working with others to kind of signpost young people, particularly now while we're in this COVID pandemic, that they have access to a provision. I think as a service, COVID as a online provider, COVID hasn't had a huge impact on what we're able to provide. We have carried on delivering the services pre-COVID as we are now. So as an online provider, young people will still get the same level of support, kind of chat sessions, articles, but we are putting on more activities to support young people while we are in this pandemic as well. Sorry, last slide. So say that's the end of my presentation. You've got my email and contact number there if there's anything, any questions you want to ask, or if there's anything joint working we can do. We will really be interested in particularly some joint working and partnership working. And we have been in Dudley, oh God, quite a few years now, 8+ years. So it's been a real kind of across the country, it's been a real kind of eye-opener with the current pandemic and what we're able to do and what young people are saying about the service. So thank you very much. I'll pass you on to my colleague, Melanie Griffiths from the Kaleidoscope Plus group.
Thank you so much, Cal. This is Jackie. I'm just interjecting there because we're really running over, but all of the presentations have been excellent. I think we could have had just even one topic. We do need a very quick decision with Mel if people are happy to remain online, and we'll just reduce the meet and greet. Can people just quickly say on the chat, because the last presentation is suicide prevention, and of course just so important, but I just wondered if people could just indicate on the chat if they're happy for Mel just to do that presentation. A quick yes, a quick yes or no. But I think we're seeing lots of yeses. So yeah, let's go straight to Mel, and yes, and we'll reduce the meet and greet. Thank you for bearing with us. Over to you, Mel.
Hi, so thank you very much everyone for ticking yes in the chat box. So I'm Melanie Griffin, and I work for Kaleidoscope Plus Group, and I am the Suicide Prevention Coordinator for the West Midlands and Warwickshire. I won't go into full details about the presentation because obviously we are on time. And a lot of actually things that we've been talking about already this evening with the other presenters have actually been covered in some of the parts that we were going to cover anyway. So that's kind of sped it up a little bit. So a little bit about KPG. KPG, Kaleidoscope Plus Group, it started in 1973. It's a wellbeing and mental health organisation, and my part of my job role is suicide prevention and postvention. I've been bereaved by suicide. I understand how people who are bereaved by suicide may feel, and working with people who are struggling with thoughts of suicide and doing interventions, I can kind of empathise with them how that they might feel. So next slide, please. So what we need to do is when we are thinking or talking about suicide, we need to make sure that we actually know what we are talking about. And you will spot red flags, and very similar actually to what we've previously spoken to about FGM, forced marriage and domestic abuse. There are red flags that you might spot with somebody who is thinking of suicide. And we've broken it down into those categories there for you. So emotions and feelings, events or triggers that might occur, physical signs, thoughts and behaviours. So it's not an endless list, but you will notice in people certain changes, and it's always easier to spot that someone might be thinking of suicide if you know them, you know how they usually behave or how they usually interact. So some examples that you might spot with somebody is a loss of interest in themselves, change of appearance. They might not be sort of getting themselves dressed up, greasy hair, no makeup, general appearance might have changed, loss of interest in hobby. They may not be coming to their place of religion anymore. They might just have stopped attending, withdrawing from their community, withdrawing from their family. There might be signs of alcohol abuse or taking drugs, reckless behaviour, for example, giving away possessions, almost wanting that person to remember them by that possession. Doesn't have to be anything expensive. It could be something as simple as their favourite dress or a picture that they know that their loved one would want to remember them by. The feeling that they might be depressed, there might be anger. In general, they might be feeling hopeless or helpless. There's a lot of different events that might have happened to that person, and we spoke about them earlier on. They might be struggling with their sexual identity. There might have been a rape or domestic abuse, or even, as one of the presenters said, that they might be forced to come out in their sexuality, that actually their community may or may not accept them, and they may struggle with that, and that can also be a factor. As I said, that's just a few examples. We can't necessarily get through that in 5 to 7 minutes, but that's just some examples of what you might actually notice in somebody. Next slide, please. So when you've noticed these potential signs, or you've noticed that something's going on with that person, you need to ask them. Now, I understand it's a really hard question. Suicide is not something that anybody necessarily feels comfortable talking about, especially if you're worried that you might possibly get a yes back. But it is really important that we don't bury our head in the sand. People who are left after a suicide, so the survivors of suicide, will always say, if only I'd have asked, or if only I had spoken to them, or if only I'd have answered the phone call. And it's really important that we actually do ask those questions and actually listen. So you need to ask, you need to appear confident. You don't necessarily need to have all the answers. We're not asking you to have that, but we just want you to start the conversation with them. You need to tell the person that you want to help them and that you care about them and that you are there to give them support. The one thing I would say is never, ever agree to keep their thoughts of suicide or their plan to kill themselves a secret. It's really important that you speak to somebody, and somebody that they trust and you trust, a professional, asking for some advice, some of the support lines we spoke about earlier, but never agree to keep it a secret. Especially with younger people, they'll be like, please don't tell my parents. I don't want my parents to know. that it's really important that you say something along the lines of, I can't keep it a secret, but let's talk to your parents together, or let's speak to a professional first, a helpline, and then we can think about telling your parents afterwards, but never agree to keep it a secret. So there are some different ways that you can ask the question, and on the next slide there's some examples for you. So the ones in the green are possible ways that you could ask somebody, are they thinking about dying? And the one thing that I will say is, you have a little read through the ones in the blue. We are used to saying, are you thinking of committing suicide? It's an old language that stemmed from when suicide used to be a crime. It's something that obviously now suicide is no longer a crime. It's not been a criminal act since 1961. We need to move away from that use of language. It makes them feel that they are committing a crime or doing something wrong. And especially people who are left behind, they don't like that necessarily, that wording. So there's some different ways. Are you thinking about suicide? Are you wanting to take your own life? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you telling me you want to die? The sound, you know, it's probably making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but being direct and knowing what we're talking about, so that that person only has to say yes or no back, takes the pressure off them, and then we can help them. The one that's in red is something that, again, just have a little think about how we say it to them, is to not sort of say, you're not thinking of doing something silly, are you? Or you're not thinking of doing something stupid, because straight away you're telling them that you think that suicide is silly or stupid. So just be direct, ask them directly, are you thinking of killing yourself? Once you've obviously had a conversation with them, you've spotted the change, and you are thinking, or you believe that we are talking about suicide. And next slide, please. What I will say is that we're not expecting you to handle and do a suicide intervention with that person. We're just asking you to start the conversation. You're not going to put the idea in somebody's head by talking about suicide. It just needs to be done sensitively and sensibly. So there are lots of different support services out there. Here's some examples of ones that, you know, are quite common. We have the Shout text line, the one that we also use through Kaleidoscope. It's a text service. They can be at home, they can be you know, with family, but nobody necessarily needs to know what they're texting about. And that's something that is quite good for young people, people maybe with hard of hearing, or people who are around their family and that they don't want them to hear. But as you can see, there's lots of different services there that are available for you and for them, and you can pick up the phone and have a conversation. If somebody has already taken steps to end their own life, or you believe that you can't keep them safe at the end of that conversation, ultimately you do need to call 999. It's about saving that person's life. But there's just some examples. A quick Google search will bring some support lines up for you, and also some suicide safety apps as well are available. So Stay Alive, for example, is a great example of an app. Next slide, please. If you are unfortunate that you have been bereaved by suicide, or you know of somebody that has been bereaved by suicide, please make sure that you give them some support and signpost them to an organisation that provides postvention support. There is actually one that's been released recently, and it's in it's a virtual group, but it is for women, and it is a Punjabi speaking postvention suicide support group. So I will share that detail with the organisers of tonight's event. But here is one, for example, that we host, and it's for West Midlands and Warwickshire, third Tuesday of every month, 2 hours, and you are around other people who have been bereaved by suicide, who can empathise and provide you with support as well. We also have, as you will see on the right hand side, there's 2 books that have been designed. Help is at Hand is one that I have personally hand out to every single person that I come across that's been bereaved by suicide. It's put together by professionals, but also has an input from people who have been bereaved by suicide as well. So it's a really vital book, really, to make sure you can get your hands on. It's a PDF version or a physical copy. And also the Finding the Words book is one if you are trying to provide support to somebody who has been bereaved by suicide, and helping you try and put your thoughts and feelings into words for them to help them. So have a little look at those, and they're available online, and as someone has popped in the comments, support after suicide, there are the booklets on there as well for you. But as I say, that's a post-vention support that is available to anybody who is over the age of 18 on that one for you. Next slide, please. If you want any more information, or you've got a question that you don't necessarily want to ask in the comment section, those are my details. Please get in touch. If you want to know more, you want to learn more about suicide, or you'd like us to maybe come to your community and have a little talk, that's an option as well. But mainly if you want to just ask a private question, then please do get in touch. Other than that, that's my little segment done. So I will hand over to the next talker. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much to all our speakers for a fantastic evening of presentations, giving us a wealth of information of the variability of the available types of support. And if we can go to the next slide, you'll see even more details of other resources that are available. If anybody wants to make a call to Dudley Mind this evening, they are actually open till midnight. If you're interested in exploring more and going on a free online psychological first aid course, the link is there. Several times in the chat, the Let's Get website's been mentioned from Dudley Council, many pages with lots of sources of support. If we can have the next slide. Thank you. The previous languages are and translations are available from the source at the bottom there. Another very local group, Fusion, for Black and Asian minority ethnic support group for teenagers 13 to 18, has now gone online. Despite all these services, some of the questions actually do sort of seem to imply that there is a lack of support in certain areas. So with that, if I can ask all the speakers, if they are asked or to answer the question, if you could give one top line message, because we are really approaching the end of our evening. So if I hand over to James for the first set of questions, thank you.
Hi, Anne. I know that James was having IT problems, so I don't know, you might want to go ahead.
Okay, I will carry on then. All right,
Thank you.
that's okay, that's no problem. Okay, a first question then relates to an elderly lady with pulmonary fibrosis who's missed her church and her normal contacts. She's been contacted by phone, but that isn't the same as face-to-face. What could you suggest that would help? Who'd like to answer that one? Be any of our community people, or Zita or Joe? So an elderly lady, isolated, in telephone contact, but it's not enough. Despite all the wonderful services that have been mentioned tonight, what can anybody else suggest that would help this lady?
I think Heidi's.
Heidi?
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Heidi. That's great.
Okay.
What would you say to the family who are concerned for this lady?
I'm really pleased that it's been raised, and I think it is really tricky, particularly when we look at vulnerable communities who are limited by illness or age. What I would say is that the 5 ways to wellbeing will do something to help her well-being. So it may not be a fix-all, and the key will be to sit and think creatively about how she might be able to structure her day a little bit differently, so that there are little things that can give her pockets of joy, variance in her activity, bits of learning. So, you know, I've worked with people who are in their 90s who are bedbound, and we've still been able to think about something that fits into each section of the 5 areas of well-being. So it's about being creative. It's about truly believing that we can all make small differences to try and improve our well-being, but also maximising the use of telephone support, maybe then thinking about linking that into sort of video support, but using a telephone at the same time, and actually thinking about moving forward, safe relating, how we might also be able to think about getting some community support, some community volunteers in there in the future.
Thank you, Heidi, for that. James, are you back now?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. Apologies for the gremlins in there. A similar question. Somebody sent a message just to say that their son is kind of living with a mental health condition, and particularly asking around DBT and where how referrals for DBT might happen. And just personally, I'd like to add in, what is DBT, because I don't know about that. This particular person is located more towards Birmingham, but I wonder if the methods of referral might be similar in all areas. I think Zita's struggling to unmute, but was it Zita who mentioned about DBT?
Yes, it was Zita.
That's it, I've done it now. It's like I couldn't admit. Yeah, I mean, DBT is dialectical behaviour therapy, and it is particularly for people that have a personality disorder or struggle managing emotions, and they engage in behaviours that have an impact on their quality of life or are life-threatening. So you have to be in secondary mental health to access it, because it is a year-long therapy, and you do need to have a care coordinator. Although I'm part of the DBT team, and we do have people that don't have a care coordinator, but you do have to be in secondary mental health. I mean, there are kind of, I think there is a online, which is called, I think it's, I can't remember, there is a DBT online which has got the skills on that people can access, but as the DBT itself, for the format, for the kind of telephone contact and the group, you have to be in secondary mental health. Has that answered the question?
That's really helpful, Zita, thank you.
I mean, some of these skills, the distress tolerance, kind of that helps with people that do have thoughts of self-harm, come under DBT as well. But I think if you Google distress tolerance, you will get some information come up on the website as well. So if you Google DBT, you will get quite a lot of things come up, and the skills.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Zita. Somebody made a really helpful point, I think, that that a lot of the online stuff is good, kind of particularly for younger people, but what if maybe somebody's a bit older? I think in the question they specifically mentioned 55 to 60, and they're living with a disability, unemployed, and have limited IT skills and completely alone, and actually a feeling that that's quite common in the clientele that they're particularly working with. So does anybody have specific ideas that might be able to help people where technology and maybe age or disability or possibly poverty as well, if people are unemployed, are a barrier to accessing some of these great things that are available online?
Should I just answer that one quickly? This is Cal. In some areas we do have the equivalent for adults. So the kind of very similar to the Kooth platform for adults. It's not something that's currently available in the West Midlands, but it is seen as a platform for the older community. And what we did do a pilot session where we worked with key people from the BAME community, where language was a barrier, but also people with disability, to just see if the online platform could support those young people, support those adults, particularly the older adults, in kind of getting the support they needed. But also what we found is some of the areas for adults, having the online platform helped reduce some of that isolation, because they were talking to other adults who were experiencing the same level of isolation, or it had this kind of safe life experiences that they were able to relate to. So I think there is opportunity for some adults to or opportunity for us to look at something very similar for Dudley, and we recognise that not everyone will have access to IT facilities, hence why we kind of try to work with libraries and other providers where they've got access to IT equipment that can be utilised, so people can have access to those facilities. I suppose at this present time it's very difficult because of the due to COVID and having limited access to those provisions, but it is something that could be looked at long term.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And have we got time to squeeze in any more questions?
I think probably we need to hand back to Jackie, James, and
no problem at all. It's just a reminder, I'll put the details in. I'm sorry we haven't managed to answer everyone's questions, but I'll put an email address and a telephone number where people can contact if they do have any questions.
Been some very, very helpful points put in the chat, actually, James, particularly in relation to the question about what help is available for people that don't have internet connection. So it's worth having a look at those later. Jackie, shall we hand back to you then to take us into the next part?
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you, James, as well. Thank you most of all to our speakers. We want to thank you for that really, as I say, important and exceptional information in such sort of, challenging circumstances, taboo areas, and difficult areas, but it's such important information that we need to know. I wonder if our speakers would be able to respond maybe via email to the questions, and possibly we can upload that with this week's video. But if I can see some nodding of the heads, that's great if that can happen, and obviously we'll work with Anne and the team to arrange that. So can we end the recording there, please?